Today's lesson is section 2.4, solving with variables on both sides of the equal sign. So the objective for today, after today you should be able to solve an equation that contains a variable on both sides of the equal sign. So before we dive into today's lesson, let's quickly review how to solve a multi-step equation. So take a second, pause the video, and try this one out on your own. The first thing you want to do is distribute the 1/2. You always want to eliminate any grouping symbols first. This includes parentheses or that big long division bar. So 1/2 times 6x gives me 3x. 1/2 times a -12 gives me -6. Make sure you bring down the +3, your equal sign, and the 15. Next, you want to combine like terms. Remember, when you combine like terms, you want to look at the left-hand side of the equal sign and see if there's anything you can combine. I notice I can combine the -6 and the 3. Those are like terms. -6 plus 3 is -3. Now I need to just follow the order of operations in reverse to solve for my variable. This 3 here is attached to the variable by subtraction, so to move it to the opposite side, I need to add 3. -3 plus 3 is just 0, so I'm left with 3x on the left-hand side. 15 plus 3 is 18. Last, I need to get this 3 away from the variable, so I need to undo the multiplication. Remember that 3 butted up next to the x denotes multiplication. So to undo multiplication, let's divide. Divide by 3 on both sides. 3 divided by 3 is just 1, so I'm left with x equals 6. Before you call that your final answer, make sure you check it to make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to replace my x up here with 6 and then just follow the order of operations to simplify it down. If when I simplify this down I get 15, I know x must equal 6. So starting with my parentheses, 6 times 6 is 36. 36 minus 12 is 24. 24 times 1/2 is 12. Plus 3 equals 15. So x must equal 6. So that's just a review of solving a multi-step equation like we did yesterday. Here comes the new stuff. So solving when there are variables on both sides of the equal sign. Your equations are going to look like the one I have listed up top. Notice how we now have a variable not only on the left-hand side, but also on the right-hand side. So there's an extra step involved when solving these, but for the most part they solve very similar to the multi-step equations that you guys have been working with. So here's some helpful steps. Before you start solving and moving stuff across the equal sign, you always want to simplify. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Combine like terms. Look at the left-hand side of the equal sign. See if there's anything you can combine. Look at the right-hand side of the equal sign. See if there's anything you can combine. Do not try combining things across the equal sign. That is solving. That's a big no-no. That's not combining like terms, that is solving. Just look at the left-hand side and combine things. Look at the right-hand side and combine what you can. If you see parentheses, make sure you distribute. If you have that big long division bar, make sure you eliminate that as well. So once you're completely simplified, there's nothing more you can combine together, distribute, or eliminate, then you want to focus on step 2. Step 2 says to get the variables to one side of the equal sign. Does not matter which side. You can move the variables to the left-hand side if that makes you happy, or you can move them to the right. You should get the same answer either way. Just make sure you move the variable correctly. Once you've picked the side for the variable and you've moved it to the left-hand side, let's say, the third step says to move the constants to the opposite side. So if you've moved all your variables to the left-hand side, then you want to make sure your constants, which are your numbers that do not have a variable attached to them, are on the opposite side. Once you've done that, the fourth step is just solving using your StatMap, using the reverse order of operations. At that point, it should look very much like an equation you guys saw yesterday. So it should be very familiar. And just like we did yesterday, you always want to check your solution to make sure it makes sense. If it does not make sense, when you check it, you've done something wrong, so go back and fix it. So let's do our first example. Directions say solve. Make sure you check your solutions, okay? So my first step, and if you need to look at those steps, pause the video. You can go back to that slide, or you can write them down if you have your note sheet in front of you. The first step is to simplify. So I'm going to look at the left-hand side of the equal sign. I have 3w plus 2. I can't combine those. I don't see any parentheses for distribution, and there's not the big long division bar. So that's simplified. Let's look at the right-hand side. I have 7w. Well, there's nothing to combine with it. It's just hanging out by itself. There's no parentheses, and there's no division bar. So that is simplified. My second step says to get the variables to one side. So I'm going to move my 3w over with the 7w. So I'm going to subtract it. Now, make sure you understand, you're not just moving the w. If you were just moving the w, you could divide by 3. We're moving 3w. The 3w is positive, so to move it, I need to subtract. (3w minus 3w is just 0. Bring down my 2. 7 minus 3w is 4w. Okay? Now my third step says to get the constants to the opposite side. Well, my constant in this problem is 2, and just because of the way this problem played out, when I move the variable to the right-hand side, my constant is already on the left-hand side. So I don't need to move that again. It's already on the opposite side, so it should be easy to solve from here. So now I just need to follow my SADMEP steps. I need to get w by itself. I don't see any addition or subtraction. I just have the 4 attached to the w, and that's through multiplication. So to move it, I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides. Be careful here. Common mistake. 2 divided by 4. A lot of you are going to say it's 2. It's not. Pay attention to detail. The answer is actually 1/2. 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2. Remember, 2 divided by 4 is not the same thing as 4 divided by 2. Pay attention to detail. Okay, before we call this our final answer, let's check our work to make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to replace w with a half. I have to replace both w's. So yesterday we just had one variable in the problem you had to replace. Make sure you guys replace both variables with your possible value. So we have 3 times 1/2 plus 2 equals 7 times 1/2. Go ahead and combine these. 3 times a half is 3/2 plus 2 equals 7 times a half is just 7/2. To add fractions, you need a common denominator, so you need to take this a second to get that. If you are confused on how to add fractions, I have a very helpful video on my website. Watch it. You need to get comfortable with that. Your common denominator will be 2. You have to adjust the numerator, and that'll become a 4. When you add fractions, you keep the denominator the same, and you add the numerators. 3 plus 4 will be 7/2. 7/2 equals 7/2. That's a true statement. So that's your final answer. If you would have gotten something like 7/2 equals 3, or 15 equals 7/2, those are statements that aren't true. 15 and 7/2 will never be the same number, so that is how you would know you've done something wrong. Okay? Next problem. Solve, make sure you check your answers. So we have 8s minus 10 equals 3 times the quantity of 6 minus 2s. So let's look at the left-hand side. 8s minus 10. I don't see any like terms, I don't see parentheses, and there's nothing to eliminate. So I'm simplified on the left-hand side. On my right-hand side, I see parentheses. That's the first thing I see. So I know I need to distribute. So that's what I'm going to do first. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times negative 2s is negative 6s. So now I need to get my variables to one side. This time I'm going to move my negative 6s over with the 8s. If you want to move the 8s over here, you're fine in doing so. Your steps may look a little different, but your final answer should be the same as mine. So remember, I'm not just moving the s, I'm moving the negative 6s. So I need to add 6s to both sides. Negative 6s plus 6s is just 0, so I'm left with 18. 8s plus 6s is 14s. Make sure you bring down your minus 10. So at this point I need to get my constant to the other side. Well, my constant here is this negative 10. I need to get him away from the variable, so this really is just a multi-step equation, or a two-step equation. So just follow your SADMUP. So you're subtracting 10, so to move it you need to add 10. Negative 10 plus 10 is 0. 18 plus 10 is 28. Last step, 14 times s equals 28. You're multiplying here, so to get the s by itself, you need to divide. S equals 2 is our possible final answer. Let's make sure it makes sense. You need to replace this 2, this s, with the 2. So 8 times 2 minus 10 equals 3 times 6 minus 2 times 2. And just follow your order of operations to simplify. 8 times 2 is 16. Bring down your minus 10 equals 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 16 minus 10 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. Make sure you bring down the 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 does equal 6. That's a true statement. So s must be equal to 2. Final answer. Alright, go ahead and pause the video for a second and try these problems out on your own. Make sure you check your answers. The answers are listed below. If you are struggling with these, make sure you see me after school or before school to get additional help.